My name is Elizabeth. It's been a while since the legal battle ended, but the weight of what happened still lingers. The victory didn't bring the relief I expected. Instead, it left me with an overwhelming sense of exhaustion and a deep, abiding grief. I remember sitting in my lawyer's office, holding the letter my brother had written. It was a meticulously detailed account of his suspicions and the evidence he'd painstakingly gathered. The USB drive beside it contained all the proof he needed to expose the fraud. I read the letter twice, each word like a punch to the gut. I could almost hear his voice, filled with fear and determination, as he described the long-standing manipulation by his wife's family. Let me take you back to the beginning. My brother, Henry, was 62 years old. He was a self-made man. He grew up in a small town in Ohio, the son of hard-working parents. Our father was a carpenter, a man of few words but with a strong sense of integrity. He always said, "What you build with your own hands belongs to your own blood." Our mother was a schoolteacher, kind-hearted and nurturing. Henry started his real estate development company from scratch. At 28, he borrowed money to buy a small duplex in a rundown neighborhood. Through hard work and smart investments, by the time he was 52, he had properties in 5 states. He was never one to flaunt his wealth. He drove an old pick-up truck and wore the same pair of work boots he'd had since college. Every Christmas, he'd anonymously donate to the local community center where we used to play as kids. Henry had been married to Victoria for 10 years. Victoria came from a wealthy family in Chicago. Her family owned a large property management firm. From the very first family gathering after their marriage, her father, Mr. Thompson, made it clear that he saw Henry's company as an extension of his own family's business. At dinner tables, he'd talk about the company's portfolio as if he were the one who built it. He'd forward business contacts to Henry with emails stating, "For the family's greater good." One Sunday morning, the kitchen smelled of burnt toast when my phone rang. I'd just turned off the toaster and was standing by the window, watching the snow fall on the backyard where Henry and I used to build snowmen as children. I saw his name on the screen and answered. He didn't say hello. "Elizabeth," he said, his voice strained, like he was struggling to hold back tears. "I need you to come to dinner on Friday. Promise me you won't cancel." I promised, and he hung up before I could ask why. That Friday, I drove from my place in Columbus to Henry's house outside Chicago. The drive took about 3.5 hours. I listened to the radio, my mind filled with anticipation. I'd missed Henry. Life had been so busy, and I'd barely had time to catch up with him. When I arrived, Victoria met me at the door. She gave me that fake smile, the one that never reached her eyes. "It's good to see you," she said, taking my coat. Her brother, Ryan, was in the living room, sipping on a glass of scotch. He stood up and shook my hand, saying it was a pleasure as always. "I noticed that Mr. and Mrs. Thompson weren't there." I filed that away in my mind, not knowing why it seemed important. A few minutes later, Henry came in from the back. The moment I saw him, I knew something was wrong. He was deathly pale, like he'd seen a ghost. He hugged me tightly, longer than usual. When he pulled back, he held my shoulders and looked at me as if he were trying to commit my face to memory. I asked if he was okay, and he just said, "I'm glad you came." Dinner was an uncomfortable affair. The conversation was superficial, about the weather and a renovation project Ryan was doing on his house. Henry hardly ate. He pushed the food around on his plate and kept his eyes on the table, except when he looked at me. Each time he did, there was an unreadable expression on his face. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, while Victoria was in the kitchen and Ryan had stepped outside to take a call, Henry reached across the table and placed his hand on mine. "Check your phone," he whispered. I looked at him, and he nodded slightly. I slid my phone out of my pocket under the table. There was a bank notification. I opened it and saw a transfer of $5 million. I looked at Henry, speechless. He squeezed my hand. Don't say a word. Keep it. Don't tell anyone. Promise me. I was in shock. What's going on? What did you do? I asked. I'll explain later, not here, he said. When I left that night, Henry walked me to my car. It was freezing, and he didn't have a jacket. I told him to go inside, but he said he needed a minute. We stood by the car, and he looked up at the stars. Do you remember what Dad used to say? He asked. I said I did. I built everything myself, Elizabeth. Every single bit of it. Don't let them take it away, he said. Then he hugged me again, and I drove home. My hands were shaking so much that I sat in my driveway for half an hour before going inside. 5 days later, Victoria called me. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she'd rehearsed what she was going to say. Henry was found unresponsive. They think it was a heart attack. It was very sudden. I'm so sorry. I didn't cry on the phone. I hung up and sat on the edge of my bed, motionless. I called my lawyer, Sarah, a friend from my church. She'd been practicing estate law for 35 years, and I trusted her completely. I told her everything that had happened, from the phone call to the transfer. She told me not to touch the money and to come see her the next day. Henry's funeral was a large event. He'd known so many people, and most of them were genuinely sad. Victoria stood at the front in a black dress, receiving condolences with a composed face. Her family surrounded her. Mr. Thompson shook hands with Henry's business partners, speaking to them in a serious tone. Ryan stood by Victoria's side all afternoon. I sat with Henry's old friends, hardly saying a word. I watched Mr. Thompson's eyes scan the room, sizing things up. I saw Ryan excuse himself twice to take calls outside. And I saw Victoria tuck a folded document into her bag without even looking at it. The following Monday, I received a certified letter from an attorney representing Victoria and her family. It stated that Henry had signed an amendment to the company's operating agreement, designating Mr. Thompson as a co-owner. They also requested that I confirm in writing that I hadn't received any transfers from Henry's accounts in the past 90 days and that I had no claim on his personal or business property. I called Sarah and read the letter to her. She told me not to respond and to bring the letter to her. When I got to her office, she read it and then asked me to tell her everything I could remember about the past few years. I told her about a phone call 2 years ago when Henry mentioned having the company's financial records audited because something didn't seem right. I also told her about a Thanksgiving 3 years ago when I overheard Mr. Thompson on the phone saying, "The signature is close enough. Get it on the other forms, too." Sarah asked if Henry had ever mentioned life insurance. I told her he had a large policy and that I was the secondary beneficiary after Victoria. She pulled up something on her computer and showed me a filing from 8 months ago. Henry's policy had been amended to remove me as the secondary beneficiary and add a trust under the Thompson family's management. The signature on the amendment didn't match Henry's. 2 days later, Victoria called me, saying she wanted to have a conversation to clear the air. I told her I'd think about it and then called Sarah. Sarah said she'd come with me if I decided to meet Victoria. We met at Sarah's office. Victoria, Ryan, and their family's attorney, a well-dressed man, arrived. Ryan did most of the talking, saying that Henry had wanted to restructure the company's ownership for continuity. Sarah asked to see copies of the documents. Their attorney slid the copies across the table. After they left, Sarah said she was sure the signatures on the insurance amendment and the operating agreement addendum were forged. She filed complaints with the Insurance Commissioner's Office and the State Attorney General's Office. She also hired a forensic documents examiner. Over the next 4 months, the investigation unfolded. The forensic examination confirmed the forgeries. Investigators found that Ryan had been investigated in the past for a similar fraud. Text messages on Victoria's phone showed her asking her father how long it would take to remove Henry from his own company. 2 months into the investigation, Sarah received an envelope from Henry's personal attorney. Inside was a letter in Henry's handwriting and a USB drive. The letter explained his suspicions and how he'd been gathering evidence. The USB drive had all the proof he'd collected. In the end, Mr. Thompson pleaded guilty, Ryan was convicted at trial, and Victoria reached a settlement, forfeiting any claim to Henry's company, personal assets, and the insurance proceeds. The insurance policy paid out to me as the original secondary beneficiary. Henry's company is still running. I hired a new management team and kept his name on the building. His boots still sit in the corner of his old office. I can't bring myself to move them. He fought until the end to protect what he'd built, and I'll always be grateful for that. The battle is over, but the pain of losing him will never truly go away.